Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Coach Candy. We are here with Coffee Chats. It is Wednesday. Cheers, everybody. Welcome. So good to see you. Hope you're having a good week. We've had some big conversations this week. So some of you that may be jumping on for the first time, we are here every day at 7:30, having some really deep conversations about just a whole plethora of things. Good morning, Martha. Good morning, Deborah. Good to see you ladies this morning. Today we're going to have a little fun. We're going to lighten things up a little bit. We've had some big conversation about how you're showing up the last 2 days. And so we're going to have a little fun and dance in the space of possibilities and just hopefully open up some access for more. So how's everybody doing this morning? Good morning, good morning. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your water, grab whatever it is, your juice, whatever it is that gets you rocking and rolling. Welcome. It is Wednesday and it's our Wednesday Wonder Space. So we are going to have some fun dancing in the possibilities. So how's everything been going so far? How are the conversations? Any interesting things showing up? Anything that you're doing that you want to make sure we dig into a little bit, or we can just jump right in? Good morning, Sharon. All right, as I'm letting everybody jump in, would love to hear some of the things that are going on for you, how some of the conversations have been. I know we've had some really big conversations. Hey, girl. So today I want, like I said, I want to dance a little bit in the possibilities. I want to talk about your best year yet. And I want to think about, jump in. All right, let's go. So I want to talk about what your best year yet looks like. Good morning, Paul. And what's that one thing you need? So if you were to imagine, think about a year from now. Think about even the rest of this year. If you don't want to think that far out, if you don't want to think 12 months out, think about the rest of 2019. Think about the fact that we're moving into June. Can you believe that? And May is over. That's crazy. Good morning, Elaine. And so I want you to think about, we're, essentially halfway through the year. And that being said, if you were to think about your most amazing, the best, imagine what that would look like. That if at the end of this year you look back and you said, man, I didn't even recognize myself. That was the best year ever. What would that look like, first of all? So I want you to really sit in this space where you can imagine what your best year out looks like. What would that feel like? What would you have happening? How would that affect your life? I want you to really sit in that space because a lot of times we don't visualize enough what we're working towards. And so I want you to think about, good morning, Melinda. I want you to think about what your best year, what the rest of this year, the best version of what this year could look like. I want you to play in that space a little bit. I want you to think about, imagine if everything fell into place. Imagine if it was, I really stepped up, because this is what we're going to talk about in that space of imagining. Yes, let's dance. If we imagine our best opportunity, the best outcome, the best result, then I want to talk about what's the one thing. What's that one space that you really, if you knew you were to level that up, if you were to put all of your energy, all of your heart, all of your effort into that space, that would be the game changer for you. And so I'm curious, what comes up when you think about, okay, my best year yet? This is the opportunity. I got essentially, 6 months, 7 months left of the year that I could really zone in, really focus in. What would it be that I'm really trying to get to? What would that ultimate space look like? What would that opportunity feel like? And most importantly, what would be the one thing, the one needle mover? If you were to sit there and play in a space of imagine if, and get really honest and open and truthful with yourself, what would be the game changer? What would be, and sometimes it's a little tweak. It may not be a huge overhaul. It might be to change your discipline about one thing. It might be to introduce a new habit. It might be to, what is the game changer for you? And so I'm gonna give you guys a minute because I'm curious. We're getting into the middle of the year, right? And so many times we set goals and we put things out there and we say we're going to do these things, and then everybody looks and goes, oh my God, May's almost over. I don't know what happened. I feel like time is just kind of winding down. And I'm going to take us back to the conversation we had last week, which is around your living legacy, right? So think about it. If we've got this dash and the average lifespan in the US right now is 79, where are you in respect to that dash? Knowing You know, if at age 40, you've got about 2,000 weeks left. At age 50, you've got about 1,500 weeks left. And at age 60, you've got about 1,000 weeks left. If that is the average lifespan, and we're sitting here going, oh my God, it's the end of May. How did this happen? I don't feel like I got anything done. This is your opportunity to kind of stick an anchor in the ground, get really clear, and think about what does that look like to level up. So what's your big imagine if? I want to know if at the end of the year, if you were looking back and saying, man, I just kicked some serious ass. That was awesome. I brought my A game. I was a rock star. And this is what has changed in my life as a result. What does that look like? And what's going to be the big, good morning, Mateo. What's going to be that big needle mover, the big thing that you know that if you were to lock down a little bit, or if you were to create a new habit, or if you were to ask for help, perhaps, that would be the thing that would be the game changer for you. So what does that look like for you guys? I'm curious. This morning I want to have a little chat. I want to hear from all of you. I know we've had some big conversations over the last couple days, and so I want to get some feedback from you. I want to know where you're at, because as you know, some of you, I'm putting together a workshop, and I think right now the date's going to be Saturday, June 8th. That I want to be able to bring some tools to help you level up for the rest of the year. And so I want to know, what does that look like for you? Where are you at? Because in order to be most helpful, it helps to know, namaste, Mateo. I want to know what that looks like. What is it you need to get to that really big, juicy spot that says this is your best year ever? What is it that you need right now? Is it clarity? Is it, you know, figuring out how to utilize your time more? Is it asking for help? Is it more self-care? Is it, what is going to be the needle mover for you? Sharon, being vulnerability most of the time. Standing in a place of vulnerability. Yes, for me, I agree with Sharon. That is a big, one of the reasons I'm here every morning with all of you. This is a vulnerable space. And definitely one of my needle movers is to step into a space of vulnerability and be more courageous in everything that I do, so that I'm not holding back and no longer playing small. And so I love that, Sharon. Thank you for sharing. So if that's the case, if being more vulnerable, what would that do for you? What would that look like in terms of your best year yet? As you step into that space to challenge yourself more in that regards. And so from the rest of you, what are you thinking? What's showing up? What is the space that you need to focus on? Or if you're honest with yourself, you need to actually add that into your world and say, you know what, I really need to own this. What does that look like? I'm curious. You guys are a little quiet this morning. What is that big imagine if? It is scary, yes. But anything worth having has a little bit of that scariness, right? If it's not big enough to scare you, it's not big enough to grow you. So I'm a big fan of finding something every day. In fact, I just had a conversation with an incredible person yesterday, and that was the challenge that I gave her was, I want you to find something that scares you every day. I want you to put yourself in a place where you're absolutely, and think about it, if you did watch Brene Brown's special where she talks about every morning she wakes up and she says, today I choose to be brave. Today I choose to be in the arena. And the thing is if it's not scaring you, are you really playing in the arena? Are you putting yourself full out? And so maybe that is your big, and thank you again, Sharon. I love that you're being so open this morning. Maybe that is the space. Maybe it's simply, I want to make sure I'm in the arena more often this year. I want to make sure that I'm showing up and I'm being brave and courageous. And so question is, how vulnerable do you get with strangers, with people you are just getting to know, with people who know you best? And that's a really good question. And I think oftentimes we don't know that there's a spectrum inside of vulnerability. And so Sharon, I love your question because we typically end up erring on one side or the other. Either we don't share anything and we lose that moment that could have really built a deep connection, and we're so afraid to put ourselves out there. We're afraid someone's going to use it against us. We're afraid that they're going to judge us. That's something, we've got a lot of that shame storm that's going on. The other side of where people err is that they overshare. And it's that space of TMI, right? Too much information. They're sharing things that absolutely haven't earned that trust, because there is a trust that happens in vulnerability. And if you think about that, When you overshare and you've overshared inappropriately, you make someone else feel like you violated their trust because you're dumping things on them that makes them very uncomfortable, that they don't know how to respond. You're taking away sort of their personal power in that space, and you've just kind of vomited all that stuff without asking for permission. And so one of the ways, good morning, Terry. So I love this question. One of the ways that you can really stand in that space of vulnerability is to ask a question. Ask questions of people. And so even, especially when it comes to being vulnerable in terms of sharing something that you want to vent or sharing something that might be really personal, is to ask for permission. And I think we forget that, right? We've talked about that a couple times on this, on our discussions, is that space of asking permission. Would it be okay if I shared something with you? Would it be okay if I just for a moment vented? I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you to do anything. I just need to have a space where I feel like I could get something off my chest. Is that okay? Because oftentimes what happens is even when we're vulnerable, someone else isn't in a position to receive it. And we forget that that vulnerability also oftentimes makes someone else vulnerable. And so to be able to not only honor and create a space of deep respect and trust, and I love that Brene talks about, people have to earn the space for you to be vulnerable. And sometimes there's that dance of, do I be vulnerable before the trust is really there, or do I borrow trust and, that kind of, that space. And some of it is really being able to drop in and listen to other people. And so listen to where they're coming from, listen to where they're at, and don't make it about your agenda and what you're trying to share. Make it about how you're trying to connect. When your vulnerability is a way to connect with other people, it's a way to serve other people, you start to really master that space of when and what to share and to what level and how much. And so it's always something that, is kind of that evolution. Do I always get it right? Hell no. I will say that there's times that I'm like, I feel like I could have been more vulnerable. And there's other times I'm like, did I really need to share all that? And especially as someone, and Sharon, I know you do speaking and I know you do other things aside from even your core business, when you get in that space where you're in front of an audience. And so oftentimes I tend to already extended trust in the belief that I have something of value for them. And it's a moment where I know that something could change their life and I could connect with them. And I personally have said I've had a much easier time being vulnerable professionally than I have personally. And so even just recently, I'm starting to dig into some of those stories because I know that there's people out there hurting. And again, my vulnerability and how I choose to show up in that is a result of how can I serve in this moment, and where's the connection I'm trying to build, or where's that gap I'm trying to bridge. It's not about me just sharing for the sake of sharing, because you can also be extremely vulnerable without getting really personal. And it was always amazing to me. I'd have people even in my corporate career that would say sometimes, God, you know everything about Candy. She's so transparent. And I'm like, yes, and you don't know everything about me, because I'm also very protective about things that are very private to me, things that are very personal to me. And I allow myself to be very open. And so I think some of it's that energy that you extend to other people. I think it's that space that, again, and if you think about even from a sales perspective, the best way people show up for you, the best way that they see value in what you deliver is when they feel understood, not when they understand you. So when you put yourself in a space of vulnerability to have that person feel like they're understood, that's where the magic of vulnerability happens. And I don't know, I know I'm kind of talking in all kinds of directions around this, Sharon. I don't know if that helped answer your question some, because I think this is really important. I think people really do get into a space where they're very protective and they're never vulnerable, or they're in a space where they overshare and haven't done their work. And I remember doing some of Brene Brown's work when we were at Courage Ranch, which I've got another one of those coming up in October. I can't wait. Such a deep dive, beautiful mastermind, not only with Brene's work, but also with the horses. Such a healing space. And I remember that one of the comments or one of the training pieces was around when you can tell your story and not completely break down, when you can tell your story and you're not overly emotional, that's when you've done your healing and you're in a position to share. And so I want you to think about that too when you're being vulnerable, especially when it's from a teaching perspective or a sharing perspective. It's the space of, have you done your own work so that people can connect in, so that you're not just vomiting and trying to create the healing with people who aren't prepared for it. It's that space of, be really responsible for how you vent. Venting is never a downward game. And so somebody that doesn't have the context, doesn't have the wherewithal, doesn't have the space, be really clear that you're not sharing when you haven't done your own work. Now, if it's someone that you're close to, someone that you trust and respect, and the people who know you, and as Brene says, they love you because of your weaknesses and your vulnerability and those things, then that's again a space to say, I'm feeling really vulnerable right now. Could I share with you what's going on? And I really think we miss that opportunity to ask for permission. Which that already sets a tone and creates a container for people to show up and say yes or no. And when we don't give people an opportunity to say, yes, I can be vulnerable with you, yes, I can be wide open with you, we immediately put them in a space that sometimes is a vulnerability that they're not prepared for. And so I want you to think about that a little bit. Hopefully that helps, Sharon. I think that's such a great question. Mateo, I'm building my consulting frameworks and publishing content. Good morning, Winnie. Ownership of those tasks is the balance and discipline I'm applying with determination and forgiveness I lack for myself. Oh, that's another one of those kind of vulnerability spaces, right? Is forgiveness. It's forgiveness, and especially forgiveness of ourselves, of things that maybe we haven't done that we wanted to do, or things that we, the ways that we've shown up, or things that we start to cycle in our shame circle. And when we can start to really step in and do our own work around forgiveness, and I was reading something yesterday, I don't even remember, I think it was Dean Graziosi, where there was a comment where it was a comment that he was having, a conversation he was having with his grandmother when he was younger, and it was about, he failed a test, and she's like, can you retake the test? And he's like, no. She's like, then let it go. She's like, let it go, do better work on the next test, and overall the average will work itself out. And I think sometimes we forget that space of letting go of the need to be perfect, letting go of getting it right. We get really hung up in the space where maybe we tripped, maybe we were face down in the arena, maybe we missed a step, and we get so in a space where we're really hard on ourselves, we're really, digging in, instead of standing in that space to be vulnerable and say, you know what, that's a learning opportunity. I get to take that and take full responsibility and allow myself to drop in and have a little forgiveness. So I love that. I love that you're being so open about what's required for you to take your dream space, because I know you've got another gig going on the side and you're doing work for other people, but to take your own dream, your own consulting business to the next level, to get really clear about what's required for you to do that. And this is the ownership piece, right? It's only when we name it. It's only when we can get in a space to say, I need to do this and I am responsible for this space, that we start to take massive action that's going to allow you to have that best year yet. So let's see, what are some of the other ones? Hello, Winnie. Perfect. Oh, awesome, Sharon. Robin, good morning. Welcome. Winnie, so true, Candy. Need to do your own work to share your story productively for others when they are not in your inner circle. Absolutely. And I think this is such a missed opportunity for people. I think, again, there's this myth of, well, if I just share my stuff, then I'm building connection and I'm being vulnerable. And actually, oftentimes we're being irresponsible. Because when we're sharing for people that don't have the context, that aren't prepared, that are people that we're trying to create teaching moments for, when we share and haven't done our own work, we are inadvertently venting and creating that downward slide of all the stuff that's going downhill. And we're being very irresponsible in the fact that now there's a transparency and there's a difference when I'll share something and say, look, I'm still working through my things. But you notice that when I tell my stories, I can do it from a place where I can hold myself in a place of responsibility, in a place of confidence, in a place to say, I know what doing this work has done and where it's brought me. Not to say that there isn't still some things that get me a little emotional, or some things, and some of that's just putting your passion and your heart in a way to serve, and being really clear to say, I'm continuing to do my work in that space. I teach what I need to learn. And for every step I make another level, that's what I'm bringing and teaching you and allowing myself to be vulnerable on. And there is an incredible responsibility that comes in being vulnerable. And I think people forget that sometimes. And again, it's a space where oftentimes we find ourselves tripping in the I'm oversharing, and now I've just made a whole room full of people really uncomfortable. I've broken down any of that opportunity to build a real solid, meaningful connection. And think about what's going on in our country right now. Think about, we have such a lack of connection, and people are not being vulnerable. And to go back to our conversation from Monday, which was, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Think about that for a minute. Are you being responsible? And I think about a post my sister just wrote, and it's such a great example of being part of the solution, and I'm so proud of her for the way she wrote this post. In light of some of the heavy issues that are going on, my sister decided it was time to share that she had a hysterectomy last year, and the decision around that hysterectomy, and why that it was so important that she had a space to make that decision for herself. She didn't go and blast all of the things that are going on in the issue. She went and created a space to connect with women, to say, if you need a space to have this conversation, I know I've been there, and this is what it looked like for me. I got out of a very serious relationship, and she'll be 40 this year, and to be in a space where to make that decision, and I can share that right now because she recently just posted that, and it was such a transparent and a responsible way for how she shared her story. It was extremely vulnerable and in a way to build connection, and watching and reading the threads of how women have stepped up and said, thank you so much. I've always felt like there was such shame in sharing this aspect of my story. And it's not to get into the space to really put energy into fighting against all the stuff we don't like. It's to say, here's a safe space for those of you that didn't feel like you could have a conversation around this. Let's talk, let's connect, let's open up. And so she led with that space to be vulnerable, because over the past year, she's done her work in that space. And I think that that's just a beautiful example and distinction around, are we showing up and adding fuel to the problem? Are we instigating the very thing that we don't like, we hate, we're trying to resist? Or are we putting ourselves in that space to really contribute to the solution? And that's where oftentimes we introduce that space to be vulnerable, to say, I'm going to be the first one to step into the arena, because I know that there's people hurting right now. And it's not as much about me telling my story and everybody going, oh, I didn't know you went through that. It's about me telling my story so people go, oh my God, I'm not alone. And that's the difference when you stand in a space to take responsibility around vulnerability, is you're looking at creating that connection that says, I want somebody to know they're not alone. I want them to know that there's a space that they can feel safe and trust, and that they can have trust to know that somebody sees them and hears them and understands them. And so, yes, absolutely agree with that. Mateo, perfectionism is a space of a lack of commitment. Interesting. Perfect enough-ism. I love that. Get it good enough for the time, state of learning and money. Yes, good is good enough. Perfect is the enemy of great. And I want you to know that, for those of you that fight with that. I'm fighting the perfection instead of accepting perfect enough. I love that, because we waste a lot of time procrastinating. If you think about your best year and where you're moving and how you want to arrive at that state, oftentimes that perfectionism equals procrastination. And what we do is we keep whining and grinding. We keep waiting until it's another turn, and we're missing opportunities. We're missing so many opportunities to connect and let ourselves be real and raw. And again, it goes back to that vulnerability, because when you're in a space of, I need perfectionism, oftentimes we're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, because we're so afraid of the miss. We're so afraid of falling down. We're so afraid of getting bloody in the arena that we do everything to protect ourselves, which means we're missing those opportunities for connection. We're missing those opportunities to create effective change. We're missing those opportunities to put something out that's needed right now. And good is good enough. Perfect is the enemy of great. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Winnie, I feel like I'm continuously a work in progress. You too? I am such a work in progress. I think that's the beauty of it, right? I think we all are this work in progress, because I really do believe that if you feel like you've arrived, that you're done, What's the point? Why are you getting out of bed every morning? If you are not growing every day, you are dying in some capacity. And it's that opportunity. If you're not learning, if you're not stretching, if you're not growing, you are ultimately dying. And so I think we all are a work in progress. And I think that's where the beauty of bringing vulnerability in the right places allows other people to go, oh my God, oh, she's not perfect either. And it goes back to, Mateo, what you're saying. It goes back to, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be seen. I just need to be real. I mean, you all know this is day 43 on these lives. I am by no means in any way, shape, or form perfect. There are days where yesterday, I think was one of them, I couldn't get my words out. They just weren't sounding right. And yet we still had an incredible conversation, because it's not about me. It's about this. It's about you guys joining in the conversation. It's about creating a space where people can be seen and heard, and we can bounce ideas. And do we always agree with each other? No. And that's what's so beautiful about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be just so. It's a space where we get to show up and say, can we just have the conversation? Can we explore? Can we say what if, imagine if? Can we just challenge ourselves and each other around what we think? Because our thinking, our truth is a filter. We all have a filter. My truth and your truth look very different. And somewhere inside of all that filtering, there is an actual truth. And so it's interesting when you can be open to other perspectives and you can say, you know what, I don't have it all figured out. Because the moment you think you have it all figured out is the moment that your death is starting to happen. And I want you to think about that. Because if you really, truly think you got it all figured out, wow, you are missing so many opportunities. And to Winnie's point, that space of feeling like a work in progress all the time, if it's that space to evolve. I mean, something I believed 5 years ago isn't still a belief I hold today. It was what I needed at that moment to move me forward. And it served a point and purpose. And now I get to release it because I've had expansion and I've evolved and brought new learning and new experiences in that says, you know what, that belief doesn't fit anymore, and it's okay. And so you get to be that work in progress. And I think, you know, a work in progress is still beautiful. A work in progress is still something to admire, something that you can learn from. And that's why I say, stop waiting to live your life. Stop waiting until all the ducks are in the row. Stop waiting until you've got all these pieces in place, and start taking action, because there are people that need you right now. And so thinking about that, when you don't show up, who are you not serving in this moment? And so love that. Love that. We are all a work in progress. And I think that's what's so exciting, right? That your work in progress and my work in progress, together, we create something different, right? And I think about the Japanese culture where they take the broken pieces of the jar and they put it together and they seal it with the gold. It's the cracks, it's the breaks, it's the falling down in the arena. That's what makes us so approachable and so open and so lovable and so unique. And so it's all those fine cracks and the way that they come together. And if we're not constantly evolving, if we're not constantly pushing ourselves in that space, what's the point? What's the point? I mean, why would you get out of bed in the morning if there wasn't something? It's one of the reasons why for your bookends, I talk about one of the questions to ask yourself as you're going to sleep is, what's the one thing I learned today? Because if you're not learning every day, if you're not, don't have a voracious appetite and are hungry to grow yourself, then what's the point? Why are you getting out of bed in the morning? If all you want to do is live Groundhog's Day over and over again and do the same thing over and over and over, which, by the way, we have a culture that's doing that right now. It's the opportunity to wake up and say, what feeds me, what feeds my soul, my body, my mind, my heart, and allow yourself to step in and continue to grow yourself. Mateo, yes, the mindset that is best for continual growth and power. Absolutely, I love that. Winnie, yes, that is the blessing of doing inner work for the outer world progress. Ooh, I love that. Might have to borrow that one. But yes, we have this opportunity. I mean, think about all of what's around us. We were having a conversation the other day about how different it is. In fact, I ran into one of my neighbors walking my dog, and we were talking about how, you know, so many of the genius minds had to use substances because there was this, you know, fine line between genius and insanity. And we talked about how little they were connected into all the information that's accessible. And we think about where we're at. Sometimes it's overwhelming, right? There's so much information everywhere, but we have such an opportunity to learn in every capacity. And Robin Sharma, he always says, he goes, it's one of the reasons he reads, right? You all know I read a book a week. In fact, I was reading 2 different books yesterday at 2 different points in the day. But you get to have conversations with the author. whether they're living or they've passed, when you engage in a book, for example, and I love this, I love that Robin Sharma talks about this, and I so agree. When you engage in a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you're having a conversation with that author. I mean, when I read Jane Austen, I feel like I'm in that moment where she's writing Pride and Prejudice, and I feel like I understand who Jane was, and then I'm having and getting to know these characters and having a conversation, and then thinking about, reading something from Wayne Dyer or Dean Graciosi or Brendan Burchard or Brene Brown, and I feel like I'm in a space where I can have a conversation. And right now I'm reading some stuff by Krishnamurti, which is really like just blowing my mind, and I love that space, but it gets you in a space to start thinking and ask questions, and it's as if you're sitting having coffee or tea or beer with that writer, and you can engage and have a conversation. And I think about how much that lights me up and how sad I get when I look at a culture who doesn't want to continue to grow themselves, who doesn't find that space of tapping into those imaginary worlds, or into a space to really have a conversation with an author, how much they're missing. I mean, I look forward to those coffee chats with some of my favorite artists, some of those tea times with some of my favorite writers and philosophers and thought leaders who I can sit in a space and I can learn from and I can challenge myself. And it's not to say I agree with everything they write, but it puts me in a position to expand myself on a daily basis. And so I love that. I love the doing the inner work for the outer world process. Yes, have a great day, Mateo. Take care. And we all are perfectly imperfect. Yes, that's the beauty too. If you really think about when you let go of that need to be perfect, we already are perfect in every way, shape, and form that God intended us to be, or the universe, whatever you want to buy into. You are perfect. You, in the midst of trees and mountains and lakes and valleys and the sun and the water and the moon, you were created as you are to be part of all of everything else that is around you. And that in itself is perfection. And so we're going to start getting into some mindset stuff around self-worth and value and letting go of some of that perfectionism and that need to always be right, or always have your ducks in a row, or just the shame we have when we start to compare ourselves to other people. We're going to dig into some of that space, because I know that for some of you, and I've had some of you reach out to me individually, that's a space is a struggle. And to Winnie's point, we're just a work in progress. And so to give you tools that may help you approach that from a different standpoint, that's what I want to do. But awesome, I love that. This is I truly love all of you showing up every morning. It's so amazing to engage with you and not know where these conversations are going to go, not know what questions or discussions going to come up. And so what I want you to do for today, I want you to do in the Wednesday Wonder, I want you to imagine what your best year ever would look like. And I want you to imagine if you could propel yourself in a way that in 6 months from now, at the end of the year, I want you to think about looking back and going, I don't even recognize myself. I have grown so much. I have evolved. I've allowed this work in progress. I've invested in this work in progress of me. What does that look like? What does that feel like? I want you to really just kind of dance in that space. And then I want you to ask yourself, what's the one thing I need to be focused on? Or what's the one thing I need to install as a habit or a discipline that's going to help propel me there? And so that's what I want you to think about today. Hope you all have just a wonderful Wednesday. This is our opportunity to just dance in the possibilities. Think about what is possible for you. And know that I love you all. I love you all for showing up. Thank you for the conversation. And I will be back tomorrow, 7:30. We will get into a thankful space. And it'll be a pretty, maybe a shorter call, because I do have an opportunity. I'm heading out for a speaking engagement after that tomorrow. But anyway, have a great day, everyone. Make it a wonderful day. Show up with passion, purpose, power. And oh, thank you, Winnie. I'm so glad that you're here. I love doing these chats. So be back tomorrow at 7:30. Make it a rock star, impactful day. And I will catch up with y'all tomorrow. Bye, everyone.